We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit campaign. I just want to set that first. And I just want to do a quick intro about what we are doing overall. So we are focusing on 7 issues that most Americans agree on. This might be surprising to some, but over 70% agree on all of these issues. Marriage equality, a woman should be able to make decisions affecting her own body. 74% care about our climate, background checks for gun sales, universal access for healthcare, the influence of money in politics being a major threat to our democracy, and honest and fairly run elections open to all. And we are a social action campaign. So it is an invitation to join the conversation on why people vote and to get people excited about voting. A lot of, we've got to get away from the candidates, hopelessness and despair, and we have to talk about the issues we all care about, a hopeful future and empowerment. And 60% of unregistered voters say that nobody has actually asked them to vote. So in this campaign, we are trying to inspire, especially youth voters, but voters of all ages. And a lot of people think, oh, but young people don't care. Actually, that's wrong. In 2020, 54% of Gen Z voted. And in 2024, there's 40 million Gen Zers eligible to vote. And 25% of youth actually are now identifying as LGBTQ. So this issue is very important to them. These young people have grown up with the pandemic, climate change, school shootings, attacks on repro rights, attacks on marriage equality. But they also grew up in a digital world, spending hours online each day, instantly getting news from social media. And this is my favorite slide. The top 3 reasons young people give for voting has nothing to do with candidates. So we really do need to change the narrative. And that's why we've created the social action campaign. Voting is a responsibility. The vote can affect the outcome, and voting is a right are the top 3. Voting for a candidate is only at 13% and 10%. So we need to talk about the issues. And our campaign is reaching young people where they are on social media. They turn to social media for their news over 2 to 1. And, over 63% versus 20% from broadcast. So what we are doing, I will now show you a quick video about the campaign to get a feel for it, what we want people to do.
I vote for women's choice because we need autonomy over our own bodies. Why do you vote?
I vote because democracy is an important part of the American spirit. Why do you vote?
I vote because the people who came before me made so many sacrifices to make my vote count. And that's why I vote. Why do you vote?
I vote because I want kids to be safe at school. Why do you vote?
I vote because of marriage equality. Why do you vote?
For our environment, to hear our planet, to hear your rights, to hear for everything. So that's the reason I vote. Why do you vote?
I vote because I believe in universal health care for all. Why do you vote?
I vote because I care about marriage equality and people exercising their rights. Why do you vote?
I vote because action is the antidote to despair. Why do you vote?
VOTE.
So now you get a feel of what we are doing. And in the chat, the idea here is to connect, empower, and engage. So I'm going to share a Google document where everybody can put their information and we can stay connected. And after this call, I will also share our participation toolkit so you can make your own videos and help spread the word. And then I'm also excited to let you know that September 14th, 15th, we're going to do a nationwide Spark the Vote challenge to participate. But with that, all of that in your wheelhouse now, I'm going to introduce Joe, who is one of our ambassadors for marriage equality. So thank you, Joe.
Yeah, hi everyone. Good morning. Every time I see those videos, it really sparks and motivates me more and more. So thanks, Holly. Yeah, I'm volunteering with Holly and why do we vote, along with, I see Nancy's on the call. All of this is volunteer run, so appreciate everyone who's jumping in on the calls and looking to volunteer, or if there are any other volunteers on the call. I'm a longtime LGBTQIA+ AIDS activist. I was just calculating, it's like 3.5 decades. So I think I was 2 when I started. Everything from like in the 80s of Queer Nation, arrested a couple times and really proud of that badge of honor. I was a co-founder of Pasadena Pride and here in Pasadena, California. We actually, at our 1993 Pride Festival, we performed same-sex marriages with the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. That was really following Hawaii's lead back in the late 80s, early 90s of marriage equality. I am, since 1995, a Sister of Perpetual Indulgence. So I'm continue to be motivated. Currently, according to the Human Rights Campaign, there are over 520 anti-LGBT bills introduced in state legislatures. Over 220 of those are specifically targeting transgender and non-binary folks. So I was going to show a little slide about the 3, if you'll indulge me, the 3 issues that we'll be talking about. We'll be talking about gay marriage equality, and I think, yes. So if you want to do a slide screenshot, feel free and take this with you. But there are 3 states currently that are have marriage equality on their ballots, which will codify marriage equality into their constitution. So California, following repeal Proposition 8, you might remember that from 2008. Colorado has a 2006 amendment that they're looking to overturn. And then Hawaii had a bumpy ride. They were the first state to vote in 1998, or probably earlier than 1998. By 1998, the legislature, they voted against it, resoundingly no to gay marriage of 71%. Its census passed in 2013, but they never removed it from their state constitution. So this year, Hawaii will be voting to remove this from their state constitution. So with that, I have the honor of introducing, I'm going to stop sharing my slide. Holly, I don't seem to, I can share a new slide, but I can't stop sharing.
Okay.
Can you take me out?
Yes, there we go.
Great.
Yes.
Yeah, so with all that, I want to introduce Tom. Sorry, Tom, you disappeared on me in my screen. There you are.
Unmute. Yeah.
Tom Temprano is with Equality California. He is their policy person. That's probably not your correct title, Tom, but I just want to thank you for being here. Very last minute in how we got connected, but you are ready to jump in. I appreciate that you're just ready to jump in at like the last hour. So appreciate you and would love for you to introduce yourself and just talk more about California equality. At future calls, we'll have someone from Colorado and someone from Hawaii. So if you want to throw anything in there about Colorado and Hawaii, that would be great as well. So I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Holly. It's great to be here with I've got my coffee and everything. I'm caffeinating along with y'all. So yeah, my name is Tom Temprano. I like policy person better than my actual title, which is like very wordy and doesn't make it is not really indicative of what I do, but I oversee our organization's legislative, political, and communications work. So all the fun stuff, as I like to say it. And Equality California, we're actually celebrating our 25th year this year, and we are the nation's largest statewide LGBTQ civil rights organization. Folks in other states may know your local orgs. You know, there's Equality Florida, Equality Texas, One Colorado is the statewide org in Colorado, and we here in California have the biggest one and one of the oldest ones. And I've been at this organization for about 3 years. after, similar to you, Joe, spending my entire adult life and even pre-adult life, starting maybe in high school, working on LGBTQ activist causes and campaigns. And in many ways, this campaign that we are launching to repeal Prop 8 kind of feels like a culmination of that work. I don't know how many folk, are there folks from California here besides Joe and I? Californians? Okay, cool. I'm a native Californian. I have a whole California tattoo and everything. I love California. But I so distinctly remember election night in 2008, the high of Barack Obama's election, and just, I don't know that I've ever felt quite that high from an election result. And then the gut punch that was realizing that my own state had essentially voted to, enshrine my rights as a second-class citizen and say, essentially, I was not equal. And to me, it was just trying to think, there were people I went to high school with, there were teachers, there were doctors, there were people who I know who know me well, who went into the voting booth and said, but you are not equal. You do not deserve these same rights. And it really, is a feeling I never will forget. And I'm really excited. Hopefully they'll, nonpartisan. Hopefully on this initiative, there will be many things to celebrate this November, but one of them we are fairly certain will be the wiping away of the horrible stain of Proposition 8 from the California Constitution. So, Joe gave a bit of background there, but essentially in all three of these states, you've had voters at one time or another approve constitutional amendments that enshrined an opposition to same-sex marriage, so just opposite-sex marriage, into state constitutions. It is remarkable, and I'm going to share, there's a really cool, if anyone else is a polling nerd like I am, the LA Times actually just did a fantastic national poll around LGBTQ issues, including marriage equality. But what this really shows is just how far not just California, but the nation has come on marriage equality. We're looking back at this point, 16 years ago, there was a narrow but still decisive margin of folks that said they do not support same-sex marriage. We are now looking at well over 70% of folks who do support same-sex marriage. I liked the framing, Holly, that you shared, that there are these sort of, there are these areas of in a polarized country, these areas of really broad kind of overwhelming agreement. And it's been pretty remarkable. If you would have asked me on that night in 2008 whether I thought marriage equality would be one of those issues almost 20 years later, I would have said no, this will not be the case. We won't make this sort of momentum. But the momentum that we've made, in the court of public opinion is, I think, the most impressive. But we've also had a lot of momentum at the courts. In California specifically, our California State Supreme Court actually invalidated Proposition 8 not long after its passage, allowing same-sex couples the right to marry in California. Then we had nationally, in the Obergefell decision, essentially a national legalization of same-sex marriage across the country. Which has been in place for, I think we're almost nearly a decade now. So for all, in every state in the nation, marriage equality is now the law of the land, thanks to that Supreme Court ruling. I'm sure you who are in California and other states know the sky has not fallen. We have not slid into the sea. The world has not stopped spinning on its axis, and same-sex couples have been getting married for, over a decade now. And I think what we see in this polling and what, and all the polling we have seen is that there's just an increased visibility and familiarity and understanding and acceptance of LGBTQ people. And I think a lot of that has been a result of the success of this marriage equality movement. Folks seeing their neighbors, their friends, their family members get married and be in loving, committed relationships, just like everyone else, has really helped turn that tide. I think for many years, we as LGBTQ activists felt like that forward momentum in the court of public opinion and in the courts that rule on these things would just sort of continue on, because when you're on a roll, you think you're going to keep rolling. I think what we've seen with this particular Supreme Court is that is not the case, and that we can no longer take any of the long-held rights that we have, come to expect as Americans for granted. Because if the Supreme Court was willing to roll back nearly half a century of precedent around reproductive access in the Dobbs decisions, certainly we cannot trust that the Supreme Court would be unwilling to roll back less than a decade's worth of precedent around marriage equality. And in fact, Justice Thomas, in his comments after the Dobbs decision, which for folks, I'm sure folks know, but the Dobbs decision was essentially the repeal of Roe v. Wade that the Supreme Court ruled on back in 2022. Justice Thomas specifically called out Obergefell as a decision that could be looked at again, and Obergefell is the underpinning for the right to marriage equality across the country. So a lot of states, including California, I think, for folks who are here, we actually had a constitutional amendment response to the repeal of Roe v. Wade, Proposition 1 in 2022, which enshrined the right to abortion and abortion access in the California Constitution to try to sort of, create essentially a state level firewall from whatever the Supreme Court might continue to do. And soon after that decision in Dobbs, LGBTQ activists in California started saying, "Hey, we cannot trust this court to uphold that precedent. We still have this discriminatory language in our Constitution, and we need to get rid of it to inoculate ourselves against what might come." So this began in 2022. In 2023, we went through a legislative process to qualify this for the ballot, led by Assemblymember Evan Lowe and Senator Scott Wiener, who are two members of our state legislature who are both out LGBTQ members. I will note here a point of pride for us in California. Coming out of the November 2022 election, we actually became the first state in the nation to have 10% of our legislature identify as out LGBTQ+. And this is why when we talk about the importance of representation, we see that it really matters, because we have these champions who are willing to lead on our issues. So that process, and this is not one I think, based on some of the information I've gotten from folks in Colorado in particular, I don't know that every state is having quite the same kumbaya we are, but we in our legislative process actually received bipartisan support for this effort to repeal Proposition 8. There was not a single no vote in our legislature against that effort. There were some folks who stayed off and didn't vote and abstained, but not a single no vote. And in fact, members of both parties did vote to support this, putting it on the ballot. We are now in sort of a full campaign mode, trying to get ready to communicate with voters about this issue. Our polling is as good as the polling that you've seen in these national numbers. We are north of 70% support in California for an effort to enshrine marriage equality in the California Constitution. In our initial polling, and I'm hoping maybe we can even shift this into November, we actually, an overwhelming majority of Democrats supported this, and we were at like 48, 49% of Republicans supporting. I was like, oh, so close, we'll get there. But also just across all demographic groups, there is, aside from that one, there is support for marriage equality. One of the things we're really hoping to do in this campaign, and Holly, you touched on this in sort of the table setting and intro, I think there's a lot of voter fatigue out there. I think folks here are plugged in enough to know just how, we're seeing sort of record numbers of voters who are feeling hopeless, who are saying that their vote doesn't count. Why vote? Nothing changes. There's frustration, in various races. But what we've found is that these sort of civil rights initiatives can be a real driver of turnout, even if folks aren't thrilled about individual candidates or races on their ballot. When they have an opportunity to show up and vote to affirm fundamental rights, to affirm freedom, to affirm civil rights, we give them a reason to go to the ballot. And I think one of the things that we're most hoping to do on this campaign is specifically to target those younger voters who we know not overwhelmingly, but by record numbers identify as LGBTQ plus themselves, but also, there are like that our poll. So many of these folks don't remember a world in California that existed pre-Prop 8. For them, marriage equality has been all that they've really been known and aware of. And so we see, I mean, it is like mid 80% support among voters 18 to 29 for marriage equality. And so we know that even if nothing else is going to inspire these voters to get out, this initiative could. And so we really want to use marriage equality and LGBTQ civil rights as a driver to get those folks to the polls who may feel like they're lacking other reasons to, and hopefully in doing so, educate them about the importance of voting all the way up and down their ballot. You know, one of the things that we're also spending a lot of time on, in addition to this initiative, is actually focusing on some of the local races where folks may feel that impact more. You know, school boards here in California are sort of the flashpoint for a lot of the more divisive conversations that are playing out, you know, Joe, to your point, in state legislatures in other parts of the country. Our state legislature is about as pro-equality as you can find. And so really the places where these fights are playing out are at school boards. So we're trying to focus on those sort of races where folks feel more of a direct local connection, as well as these big sort of, you know, values-based civil rights efforts like this ballot initiative, to help make sure that every voter we possibly can get out for November does get out. So, you know, between now and November, we'll be communicating heavily with these younger voters, also really making a point to communicate with voters who, frankly, you know, I think while it was a gut punch, I was just getting done with college when Prop 8 passed, so I'm not going to take responsibility for that campaign. But the critique of that campaign was that the campaign did not do quite enough to reach voters of color, Black and Latino voters in particular, and did not do enough to reach voters outside of the, you know, I live in San Francisco, so I'm allowed to say this, like outside of San Francisco and LA, where frankly, we should not in this election cycle spend a penny communicating with voters in San Francisco and LA. We need to be focused on the parts of the state where we haven't invested as much to talk about LGBTQ equality and civil rights. So for folks in California, that means investing heavily in the Inland Empire, in Orange County, in the Central Valley, in parts of the state where it isn't, so where, you know, you're not me living in the Castro and every other house has a rainbow flag flying because it's June. You know, we need to be spending those time and resources in Bakersfield, in Fresno, in Riverside, in Orange, in parts of sort of eastern and northern San Diego County, places where we can't take that support for granted and shouldn't miss an opportunity to communicate about equality, about LGBTQ issues, and hopefully push our voters with those shared values to the polls in November. So that is the task before us. Again, we feel it's, you know, having worked on a lot of ballot initiatives, I've never worked on one that started with polling as good as this. And so it's nice to be in a position where we can use this to talk about voter turnout, to have a campaign that can be less about, hey, we need to win and we need to eke out a 50% plus one, but more talk about more LGBTQ issues broadly. Use this as an opportunity to educate folks, again, in parts of the state or communities that might not have as direct a connection to LGBTQ folks as some others do, to talk about our issues, to humanize queer people. And, you know, that's sort of the polling that I shared with you and everyone has seen. There's a direct correlation between knowing a lesbian, gay, or bisexual person, knowing a trans person, and acceptance and positive support for rights for those folks. And so we really want to use this campaign as an opportunity to talk about, you know, to talk with every community in the state about our issues, about equality, and hopefully give them a good excuse to show up in November. So that was a lot of talking. I don't know the format, but I love questions, love to be interactive. So
thank you, Tom. This was amazing. We say we want the meat of the call in the first 30 minutes, and then for those who can stay afterwards, to please stay afterwards. And I would actually love to partner with you. I'm going to share just a couple more slides. You know, getting videos on this issue for our Spark the Vote social media and filmmaking challenge. It's going to be the weekend of September 14th and 15th, so we can flood the internet the weekend before National Voter Registration Day. And we want to make videos on all of these issues. We actually already have $5,000 prizes committed for democracy and for a video about the Supreme Court. So I'm sure I can also get a $5,000 prize money for marriage equality, and we'd love to work with you and get young people up and down the state making videos and having events around this. So